leaders chase noise, others train for clarity under pressure. On this blend, we explored the systems, stories, and split second decisions that make high performance leadership repeatable. Listeners, today in this conversation with me, your host Sana, we slow down to speed up, asking what an ancient philosophy can teach modern founders who are building in volatile markets. And listeners, my guest, he has commanded in the deep, second in command on a ballistic missile submarine, and now serves at the Pentagon, where decisions need consequences fast. And he is the author of Stoicism as a warrior philosophy and a thinker on leadership, ethics, and the discipline it takes to keep people safe and teams sharp. And beyond the titles, he's a dad, which might be the hardest and most honest leadership lab of all listeners. So, if you have ever wondered, or maybe this is the first time you are coming across Stoicism, or whether it is more than just a motivational wallpaper, this conversation is your field manual. So let's get into it and meet my incredible guest, William Spears. So, William, welcome to the show, and it is an absolute honor to have you here with us.
Well, Sana, it's absolutely an honor to be here. I really appreciate you having me aboard. Hey, before we get into the discussion, I do need to say, because I am actively serving in the military, that I am just here speaking on behalf of myself. Anything that I say is just my own opinion. It doesn't represent any kind of position of the United States government or any government organization. It's just me. I'm just here as a citizen right now. So that's
Mm.
all. That's just something I have to say because if I say something
Yeah.
silly, it can get
I know, William.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think the listeners will definitely understand that.
yeah.
Yeah. So let's begin, and let's try to understand Stoicism. I mean, it is trending. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's a coincidence. We were just discussing this, listeners, before starting our podcast, but it's not a coincidence because now it is gaining momentum in there. So let's try to understand. Um, what is signal versus just founder aesthetic, William? Like, in startup and entrepreneurial circles, Stoic can mean everything from cold shower reels to Marcus Aurelius quotes on, just pitch decks or um, in posters. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we're all Marcus Aurelius' stock is going up right now, isn't it?
exactly.
Yeah. I don't think you can talk about this trend in a vacuum from the trend of mental health problems that I think we're seeing on every continent and every populated space where people are becoming increasingly anxious and depressed and frustrated and disappointed with a lot of things. And I think that is largely explanatory to why Stoicism, this thing that's been around for 2,000 years or longer, and is suddenly becoming popular. Um,
Mm,
so I'm kind of coming to this from the perspective in the military. That's why my book is frames Stoicism as a warrior philosophy, or in other words,
mm,
a philosophy appropriate for warriors. But lots of people are finding it appropriate for any other enterprise, including leadership and business. And
mm,
that is because they're finding that it is helping them to think through the things that are making them anxious and making them disappointed and approach those psychological challenges constructively. And I think that is almost a cultural adaptation to the
mm,
forces that are kind of at play in the rise of a mental health crisis, such as increasing social disconnection and social media and the kind of degradation and dissolution of a lot of former meeting spaces and meeting places and fora where humans used to interact with one another face to face, and now they're not doing that
Mhm.
anymore. And you're seeing ramifications to all that. So it's almost like a psychological adaptation to those problems, if that makes any sense.
Definitely, definitely. And William, do you think that Stoicism, I mean, was it like way ahead of time, or is this a part of, a pivotal shift in the entire humanity that we are now appreciating the ancient ways of living, thinking, being? I mean, if we were to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah. Well, you will find that there are a lot of parallels uh, in that are run through the ancient Stoic ways of looking at things that you will find in other ancient ways of thought as well. And it's because those are the things, those are the pieces of those ancient ways of thought that we still talk about today. And so that's
Mm,
something you call survivorship bias, where and if an old idea is very good, you continue to talk about it, year after year. Um,
mm,
and and it's because it gets to something that is true just in humanity and has always been true, something true about being a human. And you will find this in things like Zen Buddhism, you'll find this
mm,
in things, you know, like, the great Abrahamic religions and you'll find this in certain strains of Hinduism too, but you where they're all kinds of getting at the same ideas from different angles, and it's because they speak to certain human truths that are universal. And among all those things are lots of ideas we don't talk about anymore because they're not
mhm.
they weren't necessarily great
Yeah.
ideas. It's kind of why a lot of people will say that music was really good 50 years ago, but now that
Mm,
they don't like the music that's playing now. The reality is the only music that you're listening to from 50 years ago is the very best stuff from that time period. And the same thing is true
exactly.
for philosophy from 2000 years ago. Now, why is Stoicism particularly, and that is Marcus Aurelius is the most famous of them, but there were other ones. There was a guy named Seneca, a guy named Epictetus. Those were the kinds of the big names. Why are their ideas resonating now? And you keyed on in on something. I'm going to zoom in on there where you said, were they ahead of their time? I would
Mhm,
say they were absolutely ahead of their time in one particular aspect, and that is in the therapeutic aspects that apply in mental health. So if you go
mhm,
to see a therapist today, if you say I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm whatever, I need to go to therapy. What
mhm,
they're going to do is put you through a regimen called cognitive behavioral therapy. And what that is that's something that's been developed by people who 50 years ago, it's a fairly young practice, but, the people who developed that back in the, 1950s and 60s, they were very deeply read in moral philosophy, specifically the Stoics, and they adopted a lot of practices that specifically came from Stoic philosophy in terms of how we think about things, how I understand this problem ahead of me. I recognize that it is my impressions, my psychological impressions of what I'm experiencing, and then I break that down and I diagnose it and I say it's not this experience or this thing outside of my control that is causing me to be anxious or causing me to be disappointed or angry. It is myself. It is my reaction to that thing because some other person could experience the same thing and not react in the same way that I am. They could there it's possible that someone else could experience this thing and not be angry or
mhm,
not be upset and have perfect self-control. So what I should do is figure out how to channel and take control of my reactions to these things. And that is what Stoicism is about. But it's also what psychotherapy is about. And so that's why I say you can't really talk about this in absence of the mental health crisis, because that it is specifically the mental health crisis that I argue is the reason for it growing in popularity right now. Now,
mhm,
before it became, it blew up in popularity kind of in the 2010s timeframe is whenever you started seeing Marcus Aurelius all over the internet. but
Yeah.
it was popular in the military, at least the US military, and I think a lot of the other kinda Anglosphere militaries. It was
Mm,
popular well before that. And that's just because we study classical philosophy, and military people have found for many generations that ancient philosophies, particularly those of the Stoics, are very relevant to the leadership challenges and the psychological challenges endemic to the military profession. And so that's part of the reason why it is a warrior philosophy. It's kind of the closest thing on earth to, the religion of the Jedi in Star Wars or something like that, of just this kind of warrior way of thinking about things that can, kind of apply to other aspects of life as well. And so the book I wrote, it basically tries to lay that out and explain how it applies from, a military setting and a kind of a military perspective, as if a military leader is explaining this to their people or to their boss. So that's kind of the way that I approach the problem.
yeah, yeah. And that's quite a clear explanation of this. That's quite clear. William, you have led teams in physically and psychologically, I would say, unforgiving environments. So, which specific Stoic tools map cleanly into founder life? Like hiring or crisis communications or cash flow crunches, or if we consider the current scenario, global, political, socio-economical, yeah, scenario. Yeah.
Well, I would say any scenario where it would be better to have, uh, accurate any scenario where it would be good to have self-control and to
Mhm,
perfect that self-control and be able to perfect your reactions to a situation, whether that is shutting the hatch and going underwater on a submarine, or whether that's
mhm,
entering a busy business negotiation, or
mhm,
a tough negotiation with a partner that's likely to try to get under my skin, try to
mhm,
frustrate me, try to make me nervous or intimidate me in some way. uh, all of those kind of apply in the same way, where it would be useful to be able to diagnose my impressions, think about why I'm feeling the things that I'm feeling, give it a name, and basically take control of my own reaction to this scenario. And that allows me to be more calm and calculating under pressure, and to come to the right conclusion, and to think the right things, and basically obey myself in this situation where
mhm.
I'm likely to want to lose control, or where a, less disciplined person might lose control. Uh, Being able to maintain that control is going to be appropriate in any situation.
Yeah.
I think a good example is the emotion of anger. A lot
Mhm,
of people will ask me, "Hey, isn't a warrior supposed to be able to get angry? Isn't that something that would be useful in some situation
mhm,
where you want to be more aggressive, or
mhm,
that would be better, produce some better outcome in some kind of fight or competition?" And I would say, no, it's actually the opposite of that. You think about it like this: if you're a prize fighter in a boxing match, do you want to be the guy that gets angry, or do you want to be the guy that gets the other guy angry while you sit there and
or the
calculate?
second one. Yeah,
You know?
the second one, obviously. Yeah.
It's the one who is the one who gets angry. They're not gonna perform better in any way. There's no reason to think, whenever you actually think this through, there's no reason to think that being under the influence of these emotions is gonna make you perform better in any way. It's gonna make you
Mhm,
perform worse. Whereas if you're the one who stays ice cold, you're gonna calculate and let the other person make a mistake. That same principle applies in a business negotiation. If I enter a room, I'm in a meeting with say someone who's at my level in the organization, and they're,
mhm,
trying to get me angry, or says something insulting. If I'm able to act cold and calculating in that scenario, then everyone else in the room is going to see that, and that person who tried to get under my skin visibly is going to look like a fool. whereas I'm going to look like a cold professional. That's the person that you want to promote in that organization is the person
Mhm.
who's able to keep their cool, especially under a scenario where lesser people would not be able to stay calm and collected. And that I think a philosophical approach to these problems
Mhm.
is very useful. But the other piece of it that I think a lot of the people in the kind of the popular movement miss is that it's also morally correct. It's not just
Mhm.
useful; it is also good and appropriate and what a human being is supposed to be. And you see this in kind of any religion or any other moral philosophy where a person who is being what they're supposed to be is
Mhm.
gonna turn out to be some variant of wise, brave, self-controlled, and just. And that is in any religion or philosophy is gonna come up with something like that. And so that self-control is not just useful, it's also good. And that's I think a very important point that is often lost in this discussion.
It is. It is. It is. And I'll bring this conversation now to also um, the discussion around burnout, because that's something I think if we look at from a founder or an entrepreneur's perspective, I think everyone would say that yes, it's something, like a badge of honor that is considered, and secondly, it is inevitable. But then we're also flipping the script here, William. So founders, they often, blur grit with grind. So from a stoic lens, how do you distinguish healthy discipline from the early warning signs of burnout, that a founder should not ignore?
Well, I've definitely felt like, in my line of work where I feel burned out and I say, "I don't wanna do this anymore." And then I've looked around and said, "I'm inside of a machine under 500 feet of water. I don't really have
Yeah,
the option to quit right now."
exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That may not be the same experience for everybody.
Mhm.
How to avoid getting to burnout? I think that I mean that's gonna be doing what is right, which is gonna be paying attention to the other faculties in life that you've got to balance in all of your competing roles. So all of us
Mhm.
have various roles to play in life, and that might be CEO of my startup or,
Mhm.
employee in my organization, rising middle manager or something like that. But on the other hand, I've got this role over here of father and husband,
Mm.
and I've got this role over here as son or daughter to my aging parent that requires my care as well, possibly
Mhm.
owner of a pet or something. And I've got this other role over here as of human being who's trying to thrive and grow as a person.
Mhm.
And maybe I find that it's more important to do some of these things than to grind and to win the employee of the year award or whatever in some meaningless corporation. Who cares? And
Mhm.
and your priorities are going to change throughout life. I think what is very helpful is to name them and to basically maybe write them down,
Mhm.
going through the exercise of saying, okay, what are all of my various roles that I play? What are the friction points in between them? When can I not be a father at the same time that I am, middle manager or CEO or whatever? When does one conflict with the other? When does one resonate with the other? When does one support the other? When does being a good leader also make me a good father, or being a good father also make me a good leader? It's important for my children to see that I support my family and that I work hard and I believe in what I do. Like so, in that aspect, in that capacity, it might those two competing roles might resonate. But I think identifying the different roles that we play and
Mhm.
identifying the friction points between them, seeking out ways to find the roles and elevate the roles that resonate with each other helps to prevent the burnout that you talk about, where I can find
Mhm.
that one role performing well in one role energizes another one. I think is very useful to basically extending our kind of longevity in those roles and being able to work in a way that's constructive to all of the different capacities of our life that are important.
Hmm. I really love that panel. I really love that panel, William. And of course, let's gift our listeners some kind of actionables in there. But do you follow any kind of checklist, William? Like a 5 minute one or a 90-second everyday checklist, or is it something that you practice through each of your action or decisions or experiences every day?
Here's what I'll give you that I think has been a very useful takeaway for me, and it's really just something that my father told me when I was a kid, long before I ever discovered Stoicism in the military. But then I
Okay.
got I got into Stoicism, and then I figured out a philosophical basis for the same idea that my dad was right, but there was a really good reason that he was right, and there's a very sophisticated reason that he was right. And I get it. I get at all this in the
Mhm.
book, but the basic idea is this: if I ever find myself conflicted between being a good whatever my role is, whether that's, in my case, being a good Navy officer or being a good leader, being a good submarine guy, being a good whatever thing, and between being a good man or being a good human. If I have to choose between being a good human and being a good this other thing, I will focus on being a good human first. Do that, get that right, and the rest of it will take care of itself. And that's something dad told me as a boy. And anytime I have felt conflicted between my professional job and being a good man, I've said, "Okay, I'm gonna go with being a good man," and I've never regretted that, and it's always worked out for the better, and it's very importantly worked out for the better in that other role that I thought was somehow competing with being a good human. It turns out that the best leaders, the best managers, the best,
Mm.
military warriors all focus on being a good human first, and so that is what I will leave you with as a useful sorting mechanism for, kinda getting through those dilemmas.
Wow, that is plain and simple. But I think this can be a part of such a huge legacy in there. Especially I think in today's scenario, this holds so much relevance. That's a beautiful takeaway. I think all of our listeners should definitely take. And also, William, before we wrap up, you brought in the previous explanation um, something around morality. So I would like
Mhm.
to begin that right now, specifically around moral stress and clean conscience. Now, many founders they carry moral stress, when it comes to layoffs or sometimes pricing decisions, investor pressure. These are some situations, where it's a do or die, or it's a huge dilemma. How does a stoic founder reduce rumination and still act ethically under constraint?
Well, I mean, it's consistent with what I just said. Be a good human first.
Yeah.
The Basically, if the role if the job, is asking you to do something that is not ethical or that you think is not ethical, then either you don't understand your role correct or the role is not legitimate. And that
Mm.
connects to something that, one of my favorite philosophers, he wasn't a Stoic, but he wrote a lot about the Stoics, but it's a guy named Cicero, Roman philosopher named Cicero, who, actually is very influential in a lot of political thought today. But
Mhm.
Socrates, hundreds of years before Cicero said that, whatever is, what is good must be both honorable and useful. For an act to be good, it must be both useful and honorable. Cicero basically teased that out and said, okay, he was right, but more importantly, we should all recognize that that which is honorable is useful, and that which is useful is honorable. And that means that if it's not honorable, it's not truly useful. And it's going to, if you're making some decision, whether it's as a leader, as part of an organization or something, to start doing something dishonorable because it's going to help us in the immediate term, it's going to turn around and bite you in the long term. And I think you see that in a lot of businesses. Whenever you start doing dishonorable practices, you start breaking deals, you start reneging on your promises or trying to squeeze your allies or your partners and things, trying to extract better deals out of them and basically performing unethically, acting as a
Mhm.
unethical person does, you're going to lose your deals. You're going to lose your reputation. You're going to lose your partners, and you're going to lose your honor, and that's going to harm you in the long run, even though it might have felt like it would help you in the short run. So I think that kind of gets to that.
Definitely, definitely. I think this is universal. This is universal and this is timeless. Um,
Absolutely.
Great, great. So, William, if listeners they would like to connect with you and also get a hold of your book, what would be the easiest way?
Sure. I have a website, williamcspears.com. The book is called Stoicism as a Warrior Philosophy. It's available anywhere that you buy books. It's on Amazon and all that. And I'd love to hear from anyone. I'm active on LinkedIn as well. But if you could throw these links in the show notes, I would appreciate that as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll have all the details in the show notes. So, listeners, just refer to them along with this episode um, on your favorite podcast platform. And if I can summarize here, I think what I take away from this discussion is that we separated posture from practice. Stoicism, as now we have got to know, it isn't a vibe, it is a workflow. Perceive clearly, choose deliberately, intentionally, act with integrity, and recover fast. So, to all the listeners, whether you are shipping a product or steering a crew at depth, the habits look similar. So, if this served you, share it with a founder who leads like a parent and a professional, heart forward, standards high. And William, thank you so much for, I should say, bringing the field manual in there, your experiences, your insights, not just the quotes. Thank you. This was really, really practical.
Thank you so much, Sana.
Great. So, listeners, with this, I conclude this episode of BizBlend. And this is the space where we turn philosophy into operating systems. Subscribe, leave us a review, and tell us which drill you're adopting this week. Thank you.